I'm joined in the studio once again by GBNews' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, in the last hour, we found out that Tory MPs were whooping with delight, cheering about the fact they were being sent home to the Shires 4 days early. It's fair to say our jaws hit the desk and we weren't at all happy. Hundreds of people have got in saying, what on earth are they playing at? They should be setting up job centres in Parliament. But I believe you've got an update.
Well, that triggered a response from the system, the government. Let's leave it there. I can reveal that the government is looking at the 18th of April as a date for royal assent for the Safety of Rwanda bill. They are going to have a day voting on it on the Monday, the 15th, Tuesday the 16th, the vote, and then back with the Lords on the 17th, and it should get royal assent on the 18th. Part of the problem, apparently, is that the Buckingham Palace needs longer to deal with bills coming from Parliament to give literal royal assent, the literal signature by the King on a bill. That's obviously understandable. The King is undergoing treatment for cancer. It takes longer. So what's happened now? They've had to build in a longer time to ensure a bill gets royal assent. And that is part of the reason why they are targeting the 18th. I've also been told that we were questioning, well, it's an emergency bill back in November last year. Why on earth is it taking 3 months to get it to this point? They said, well, that's the average time to get a bill out. And had they tried to rush it through in the Commons, it's highly likely the House of Lords would have forced a select committee to examine it and slow it all down, saying that it was a rushed bill. So they had to give it time in the Commons and the Lords. So they would say, the government would say, they've gone as fast as they can. But it does beg. We have heard today 514 arrived yesterday. It's up 10% year on year so far this year on migrants arriving. They are calling it a migration emergency. Why are MPs told that they could go home early for Easter effectively? It's not quite as simple as that.
Anybody watching out there, Chris, we're thinking in whatever line of work they take part in, plumbers, plasterers, delivery drivers, teachers, whatever they may be, 3 months isn't an emergency, it's an eternity. They're moving at a snail's pace and many people, Chris, feel they're just laughing at us now.
That is as fast as you can go. Had they gone too quickly through the House of Commons, the Lords would have delayed it again, and we would end up at the same place, is the point. So we have got a date now. That's what we can reveal on your show. 18th of April is a date the government thinks they'll get royal assent. And then, of course, if that's the date, you have to add 4 to 6 weeks, maybe, to allow more challenges under the new by lawyers acting for the cohort of migrants told to get on the first flight out of here. But they are trying to say we're going as fast as we can.
OK, well, at least it shows that Number 10 is watching GB News because they're reacting in real time to what we're putting out. So that's good.
Labour's playing a game with this. They're saying Labour's ready to vote on Monday. It may be a holiday for the Tories, not for Labour. And earlier we heard from Evette Cooper, and she has something to say about the migrants crossing yesterday.
We've seen now that more people arrived on small boats yesterday than the government is planning to send to Rwanda in the next 12 months. And that just shows the gimmick that is the Rwanda policy that involves them sending £500 million to Rwanda for just 300 people. Instead of the gimmick, what we should be doing is putting that investment into improving our border security, going after the criminal gangs, and also setting up a returns unit so that we make the system work, get a grip instead of the gimmicks.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the Conservative MP Miriam Cates. Miriam, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Miriam. Welcome to the show. So, it's being called an emergency, an immigration emergency, and we were just saying that taking a month to get this through, that doesn't seem like an emergency to most people. It seems like an eternity.
Well, I can understand why people think that. And of course, we want swift action. Absolutely. And I would agree with you. And I'm sure the majority of your viewers that we urgently need to sort this situation out. And the sooner we get to the position where we have an effective deterrent in place, the better. But I think it's also important to point out that parliamentary scrutiny is a very important thing. And it's a very important part of our democracy. And it does normally take much, much longer than this to get legislation through. And in fact, cutting it too short, as Chris has pointed out, could have negative consequences. And if you think back to a few years ago at the start of the COVID pandemic, that first piece of legislation was absolutely rushed through Parliament with almost zero scrutiny, and we are still suffering from the results of that. So, of course, people want this sorted out quickly, but we cannot sacrifice the very important parliamentary scrutiny that we have in this country to make sure that legislation is safe and effective.
OK, Miriam, we were joined on the show earlier by Kevin Schofield, who told us he overheard a cheer coming from a room in Parliament last night. I'd just like to play that clip to you now, please, and get your reaction to it.
There's a lot of cheers from inside the room, and we couldn't quite understand why that was, because normally the cheers wait until the Prime Minister actually shows up. We found out today that was because the MPs were told, basically, you're on holiday from tonight. You don't have to turn up next week. This bill's not coming back. So they all started cheering because they were able to go off on their holidays a little bit early.
So, as you can imagine, Miriam, when we heard that, our jaws hit the desk in the studio here. I wonder if you had any reaction to the idea that MPs are cheering because they're being given days off during a so-called emergency.
I wasn't actually in that meeting. If it was the 1922 committee, I had a meeting off-site. But we are on a 3-line whip on Monday, so I'm not quite sure. I don't think that story's true, because we are on a 3-line whip on Monday. We have to be in Parliament on Monday. So we're certainly not finished for Easter. But I know it's very unpopular defending MPs. But I would point out that, yes, the parliamentary timetable does change frequently. Sometimes we're on a 3-line whip when we're not expecting to be. Sometimes we're not when we are. But all my colleagues, myself included, any day we're not in Parliament, we're in the constituency, meeting constituents, responding to situations on the ground. So, of course, MPs will be taking an Easter break, as will many people, but the vast majority of my colleagues will be using that time in the constituency. We have the small matter of local elections coming up as well, so there'll be lots of door knocking going on. OK.
Miriam, it's Chris Hope here in studio with Martin. Have you seen the polling from YouGov overnight, putting your party down 1 point to 19 points, Reform up 1 to 15 points, behind Labour on 44 points? We're looking at margin of error nearly, aren't we, in the difference in polls between Reform and Conservatives. Are you worried, and what should the PM do about it?
Yes, I have seen that. And yes, of course, I am worried. They are very troubling figures for Conservatives. I think, of course, in the first past the post system in a general election, it doesn't quite work out like that. The Conservative vote will be spread differently to the Reform vote. And whilst the Reform vote may be enough to stop Conservatives winning particular seats, probably quite a lot of seats, the effect of it will be to allow in Labour MPs. So that's what the Reform vote will do. But yes, of course, it is worrying. And I think it shows very much that we need to be leaning into these issues of immigration that people are so concerned about, economic security, those kind of issues that did win us the election in 2019, that Boris Johnson very much stood for. And the only route back to victory for the Conservatives is to lean into those issues that voters so very much care about. And I think the Reform polling, of course, not to take away from them as a party, they're a legitimate political party, but a lot of the polling for Reform stems from a frustration with the Conservatives rather than necessarily a desire to see a Reform government, because I think we understand that under our current system that's just not going to happen.
It's interesting, Miriam, when you say leaning into the issues that won that 80-seat majority in 2019, which now must seem like an eternity ago to you. Look, the information is even more sobering. Leave voters are preferring Reform over the Conservatives, 33% to 32%. In England, Reform 17, Tories 19, just 2 points behind. In the North, Reform have overtaken the Conservatives, and particularly only 46% of Tory voters from 2019 are going to stick with the Tories. You're also losing the working classes and the over 65s. This is the red wall made flesh, as it were. This is how you won their last time. Is there time to reach out to those voters and turn this around, Miriam?
As the Conservative MP, I very much hope so. And yes, the polling is very worrying for us. We are polling as low as we ever have. But there are also an extraordinary number of people who are saying they don't know and haven't decided. And for this point in the electoral cycle, that is quite surprising. And of course, it means we've got an enormous job to do to win those voters back. But what is significant is we're not seeing huge numbers of switchers from Conservative to Labour, which shows, I think, that there's no real passion for a Keir Starmer government. Whilst people might be upset with us, there's no real passion for Labour. But it's also, what is significant about that is in 2017 and 2019, lots of people in areas like the one that I represent voted Conservative for the first time. They'd voted Labour all their lives. Their parents and their grandparents had voted Labour all their lives. And the fact that they broke with that tribal vote, if you like, was very significant. And I think that's why we're not seeing such a rush back to Labour. But nevertheless, it does show what an extraordinary job we have got to do to win back people's confidence, to win back that Lent vote, if you like, again. And obviously Reform are very much picking up the votes of people who don't think we've done that yet.